Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for another mailbag where I answer your hot takes, your observations, your questions, and ultimately your comments about tennis or anything else. I posted on the YouTube community tab about 24 hours ago. Exciting times, ATP Finals right around the corner. Hit triple-digit comments yet again, which feels like it's a thing every week. Maybe I'll stop saying it. But I am happy to see it, and thank you for everybody who participates. I was able to pull about 18 of those comments. We'll see how many we get to. And the only thing I'll say before we get started is there were a lot of people who are like, Gil, what do you think is going to happen in the ATP Finals? Or where's the ATP Finals preview content? I will look to bang that out tomorrow night, my night. Yes, that doesn't leave a lot of time between the start of the matches, which will be early Sunday morning for me. But such is the reality of my schedule this week, which has been a particularly busy week. Okay? But I will be ignoring the comments that were kind of basically asking me for preview stuff, and I'll be doing that tomorrow night. So let us not waste any more time and get to the first comment from Jonathan. Could you provide some analysis on how Djokovic's movement has evolved over the course of his career? All right. We're starting things off very technical here with this comment that got 34 likes. A lot of interest here. Somewhat difficult to answer without doing a real thorough film study, going back and really kind of putting the two things next to each other and watching specifically for these things, because the differences would be very subtle. Now, I will say, I think some things have changed on the backhand. On the forehand, I would say almost identical. In terms of Djokovic's footwork patterns, particularly when he's moving out to his right, from the very first moment he got on a tour, he was just really good at being able to run into his deuce corner and still flip his hips. And, he's always been really comfortable hitting that running open stance forehand. In regards to his movement on the backhand, I think we have seen a little bit of a change. Younger Djokovic, I feel like he used to hit it off of his right foot more often. So, imagine Novak, and this is tough to do in this medium without breaking down video, but imagine Djokovic moving to his left. I think in the past, he would a lot of the time cross over his right foot, right across his body, and then hit off of his right foot. And as his hips came through and rotated, he would land/plant on his left leg, and then he could recover to the middle. And now, I think as things have progressed, and I don't know exactly when this started, but frankly, he's been doing this for a really long time. I just don't think we were seeing as much of the open stance stuff when he was running out to his backhand when he was really, really young. Again, the open stance stuff, it's not new. It's certainly not new. I just don't think we were seeing a lot of it pre-2011 Djokovic. Maybe even in 2011 he was doing that crossover step with his right leg more often. So I think that's a bit of an evolution. One of the things that's so unique about Djokovic, it's so rare. Most players, I think he's right leg dominant based off of what I just said, because he's always been really comfortable hitting the forehand off of the right leg. But I think when it comes to hitting the backhand off of the left leg, I think that took some developing, which means he's probably more natural on the right. That's very normal, but most players aren't able to really ever get to the point where on a hard court or a grass court, they can slide off of both legs. It's an extremely rare thing that Djokovic can do. Another thing, look, I'm not positive on this, but it is a theory. I do wonder if he's running around his forehand a little bit less nowadays and deciding to just stay in position, which would, I guess, be a product of a little bit of energy conservation, Perhaps he feels he's a fraction slower than he used to be, and therefore he wants to be more mindful of his court positioning, to stay in good defensive positioning, which is closer to the middle of the court. Those who run around their forehands at a very high rate, they do suffer a drawback or a consequence in the way that, where they leave the deuce court open. They leave space over there. So Novak was maybe, when he was more keen on being willing to do a little bit of extra running and defending, maybe he was willing to take that risk, use his forehand a little bit more, where now he's very selective. I'll just say what he is right now. He's not running around to hit his forehand from the ad side unless he knows he has a really good ball to attack. You see Ruud and Tsitsipas and Nadal and Ferrer. Ferrer used to be a big-time example of this. You see them oftentimes running around their forehand just to trade or just to build. And Djokovic is not doing that. He has too much trust in his backhand, and he doesn't think it's worth it. He'd rather stay in position. Maybe we could, I guess, if there was analytics available, we could maybe see if this is true. He probably runs around a little bit less now. So that's another adjustment in his movement. But in general, a lot of it has been kind of similar / the same throughout his career, where I think his positioning is incredible and he reads the game well. But that said, he doesn't have an extreme bias towards taking the ball early or dropping back defensively. Like he really holds a great middle ground. This is something where I know Hugh Clark with Threat of Order did a little Big Three comparison on this, and he kind of looked at Federer's preference as standing up closer on the baseline. He broke it down a lot deeper than I am going to, which is why you need to read it. But that has drawbacks. When you're up on the baseline, and by the way, commentary is way too fixated, or tennis analysis is often way too fixated on taking the ball early. Highlighting, correctly highlighting its offensive advantages. Yeah, you're taking time away. Yeah, you're well positioned to attack short balls and move inside the court. Great. But let's not ignore that defensively, you are hurting your court coverage. You are sometimes rushing yourself instead of rushing your opponent. So way too often there's kind of these blankets put on court positioning. Like, if you're inside the court and on the baseline, that's good. If you're not, that's bad, which is such an antiquated, ridiculous way to look at it. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, but hopefully you're enjoying the ramble. Medvedev, Zverev, or in the case of the Big Three comparison, you would put Nadal in here. If you are a little bit more willing to drop back because you like the defensive advantages of that. Now, in the case of Nadal, I think his weight of shot often made up for the ability to do damage from deep court position. In the case of Medvedev and Zverev, not so much. They're offensively limited from back there, and it's strictly a defensive posture for them. But, those guys will reap the advantages defensively and suffer offensively. Just feels like Djokovic always has had that beautiful balance between the two. I think I'm going to leave it at that. Next one is from Sports Fanatic. We haven't seen Sinner and Djokovic face on a hard court. Do you think the matchup we see in Turin or hard courts in general will change anything? Not really. The way their games are situated, they're very kind of modern, all-surface games where nothing drastic is going to happen surface to surface between them. The main things I'm looking out for are, what can Sinner, some of the improvements that we've seen from Sinner that have paid dividends against Medvedev in the last couple times they've played. I'm just the curiosity is, will they pay dividends, or will they be enough against Djokovic? Because in the past, Novak has had a pretty simple path to victory against Sinner. He's going to be able to absorb the linear power really well, and he's going to have a massive shot tolerance advantage and a huge consistency advantage over Jannik. So the defense from Djokovic is really going to be a huge asset against a Sinner who is not going to be able to match Djokovic in the consistency, in the shot tolerance, and despite his power, is going to have some trouble forcing errors and finding finishes, right? This Sinner who is more likely to open up the court with angles, more likely, at least he was against Medvedev, to change direction on his backhand, more likely to go to the drop shot, more likely to come forward. Fit enough so that he is more likely to match Djokovic in shot tolerance. And, seemingly also just more consistent player from the baseline now. It's all about, will the Sinner improvements close the distance between him and Novak? To me, it's not, the hardcourt aspect of it isn't much. Now, here's one other thought that just popped into my head, which is pretty crucial, actually. Turin is going to be a lot about serving. These courts are so quick that it's simple fact. It's going to be a lot about serving. So that's another thing to look for. Another improvement for Sinner, the serve. Is he going to be able to, spot serve with Novak, keep up in the free points battle with Novak? Because both of them have terrific returns. And I'm curious to just see, we know that Djokovic on a court like this, his serve is a real bona fide weapon at this point. Is Sinner going to be able to serve with him? Because that's going to be crucial on this hard court specifically. From Markov2250. Hi, Gill. Loved your work. Can you give us the current closest WTA equivalent of each of the ATP top 10? Oh, you know what? I misread this question initially. And, normally I don't prepare to answer these mailbag questions. I read them. Obviously, a thought naturally goes into my head of how I'm going to answer, but it's not like I type out notes and really plan my responses. But for this one, I read this question and I'm like, all right, there's no way I can do this off the top of my head. So I took the time to make a list, but I actually read it reverse. I thought you were asking me, give me the WTA top 10 equivalent to an ATP player. So that's how I did it. So that's how we're going to do it, because that's what I prepared for. So I'm going to compare the WTA top 10 to an ATP player. This is a stylistic comparison, okay? Very important. We need our best. I ask of you, for the YouTube commenters, your best, and your everybody commenters, your best listening skills right now. There are going to be instances where how good the players are at tennis, there's going to be a wide disparity. They're not going to be comparable in that way. There are also going to be instances in which their technique is completely different. I might compare someone with a one-hander to a two-hander. I might compare a lefty to a righty, okay? Look out for that as well. I'm not talking about technique. If I were taking technique into account here, I wouldn't find two players that are remotely similar. Because, maybe occasionally I would find an ATP WTA crossover that would make sense, and their strengths and weaknesses are similar, and their philosophy on, how they're trying to win points are similar, and their technique is similar, and their athletic makeup is similar. Like, maybe that would happen, but rarely. So I've thrown technique out. I'm not looking at technique, and I'm looking at basically styles, strengths, and weaknesses. I'm not going to go crazy with my explanations here long. Like, I could do 2 minutes defending each and every one, and I'm just not going to do that because I don't want to. All right. Number 1, Iga Swiatek. Her comparison is Rafa Nadal. Highest RPM forehand in women's tennis. It's a forehand that's clearly inspired by Nadal specifically. Not to mention some of the most explosive court coverage and athleticism on the tour, combined with a two-handed backhand that is probably underrated in its quality and its versatility, and a serve that could be better. Number 2, Sabalenka. Her comparison for me is Denis Shapovalov. They're going to try to obliterate every ball in sight. The movement is underrated. Like, both of them are really good athletes. They can scoot, but it's kind of overshadowed by the fact that they aren't really willing to play a lot of defense, and they'd rather go big. And when they're making balls in the court, it is overwhelming and pretty tough to deal with. Sometimes they're going to give you a lot of misses, a lot of errors. Number 3, Coco Gauff. She is pretty similar to the big serving counterpunchers, in my opinion. My comparison for Gauff is Medvedev and Zverev. Her better ground stroke is the backhand, just like those two. She is on the high end of first serve speed on the WTA Tour. And her defense is phenomenal. And she's not afraid to lean on her defense and to make those extra balls and trust her legs and make that her calling card. Number 4, Rybakina. I had to go to a retired player for Rybakina's comparison, and it's Tomas Berdych. Just smooth, easy power on both ground strokes, forehand and backhand. Excellent serve, albeit Rybakina, relatively speaking, probably more dominant than Berdych's serve. Actually, definitely more dominant. That said, Berdych was still a good server, and both of them also have that icy cold, calm temperament. Very, very stable emotionally as players. I think that's a great comparison if I do say so myself. Number 5, Pegula. This one might be a little bit controversial, but for me, Jess Pegula is like Djokovic and Murray. Yeah, she does not have the elite athleticism, the movement, or maybe even the endurance that Djokovic and Murray have/had. But other than that, like, if you just ignore the legs and the athleticism part of it, the way she goes about her baseline game is super similar to them. She redirects as much as possible. She does so at an extremely high level. She absorbs pace at a very high level. Her depth is immaculate. Her consistency is outstanding. And one area where she's similar to Djokovic and Murray in the movement category is her balance. When she runs to her corners, she is able to stay on balance as well as anybody. Number 6, Ons Jabeur. Comparison for her is Fabio Fognini. Just so talented with the racket, where, she makes up for any limitations, any mild limitations that Ons Jabeur has when it comes to movement are just easily made up for with the fact that her hands are impeccable, her timing is unbelievable, her precision off the ground is tremendous. She can hit big, just like Fognini. They can hit big, but it's really just a can't teach level of shot making that both of them have in their possession. That is what makes them so great as players. Not to mention, they both heavily favor the slice serve. 7 in the world, Marketa Vondrousova. This is a deep cut for the ATP player, but I think it's a pretty good comparison, and if you know his game well, I think you'll agree. Alex Molchan. They both absolutely love to hit the backhand drop shot. In this case, they're both lefties. They have high, heavy forehands where, oftentimes the net clearance is very high, and it makes their forehands difficult to attack. It makes it so that oftentimes their forehands are able to jump up above the righty strike zone. When they have a forehand to attack, certainly they can flatten out that trajectory. But in general, it's the backhand that comes off much flatter, much lower. And really, they use their variety, their point construction, their athleticism as their main attributes. Not so much their power. They're not going to hit you off the court. Number 8, Karolina Muchova. And for me, the comparison is easily Roger Federer. The smoothness in her transition game, the gracefulness in which she defends, her willingness to come forward, her great slice backhand. She is an excellent spot server, doesn't have the pace of Sabalenka or Rybakina, but oftentimes gets similar reward as them because of the precision in her serve. So Muchova, yeah, two-handed backhand, but to me, the comparison is Federer. Number 9, Sakkari. This was tough for me to figure out who on tour is Maria Sakkari, but I landed on Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. Just a terrific ceiling and potential where there are elite skills offensively. There are also, because of the speed around the court, elite skills defensively, but sometimes it's just figuring out how to put it together, how to be consistent off the ground, how to hold it together under pressure. You know, these are their weaknesses, where their strengths are actually quite well-rounded as players, where, again, they can be elite offensively and defensively. It's just some of the peripheral things that get in their way. And finally, Barbora Krejcikova is the world number 10 on the WTA tour. My comparison for Krejcikova is Sebastian Korda. Offensive player, doesn't have a huge serve to complement that offensive game, but she has really a smooth ground game. Ball comes off her racket pretty hard, even though she's very in control and not necessarily looking as if she's swinging that hard, and she's changing direction, particularly off of her backhand, which is very hard to read. Both of them have that in common. They both do that very well, attack with the backhand. Forehand has some offensive capability as well, but I think in the case of both of them, it's just a little bit more temperamental. And there you have it, the WTA top 10 compared to ATP players style-wise. I'll try to start moving through these more quickly because I'm going way too slow so far. Next one is from Itmar8721. I don't know why I even bother reading the number. Like, what good does that do? Okay. Have Tsitsipas and Zverev already reached the peak of their careers, or do you see them making it higher than what they did at their best? This is an interesting question. Ultimately, I'm at a stage with both of them where I don't think at any point in their career they're just going to be drastically better players than what we've seen thus far. I think that stage of their career in terms of constant development, it appears over. I mean, trajectory would suggest that, very much so with Zverev. And in a less extreme way, but still pretty convincing case, that Tsitsipas is also done rapidly improving. That said, at their age, they still should have a bunch of years left towards the top of the game. And when you consistently are able to put yourself in the mix, and both Tsitsipas and Zverev are good enough to put themselves in the mix consistently, you're likely going to have moments. You're going to have your tournament. You're going to have your run, whether it be you're just doing a couple of things a little bit better than you usually do any given week, or the draw opens up any given week, or the draw doesn't open up, but like some of your opponents are not quite at their best. The point is, stuff happens. And if you're a Zverev or a Tsitsipas, yeah, like maybe at no point in their careers are they going to ever finish year-end top 3 back-to-back, okay? Like, if I'm a betting man, I would say neither of them ever do that. That said, if they, let's say, I don't know, win a major, then we'll probably look at that as, oh, they've reached a peak in their career. They've reached a level that they previously had never been at. And sometimes maybe we can be inaccurate when it comes to that. And in reality, it's not that they got better, it's just that their moment happened. Like, take Daniil Medvedev, for example. I think Daniil Medvedev has been pretty much roughly, okay, and I don't want this to sound like a bad thing. It's really not. I think he's been roughly the same player since 2019, the end of 2019. Other than him, of course, being worse last year for various reasons, that was circumstantial. But I think he's been pretty much the same player. That means that Medvedev was good enough to win a major if things broke right in 2020, and then he was good enough to win a major in 2021, clearly, and he did it. And then, yeah, the circumstances were bad. Last year, some stuff got in the way of him having a decent season by his standards. And then this year, I think he's been good enough to win a major if things go well. He's just at that level where it could go either way and things have to break right for him. I don't think that Medvedev was suddenly better in 2021 and that's why he won a major. No, I just think stuff worked out for him at the 2021 US Open and he won a major. So I think that's the way to look at it for Tsitsipas and Zverev. Have they peaked? I would say yes, but they can maintain a peak and reach heights and find new accomplishments that they have yet to capture in their careers, and they can have a very fruitful and very rewarding next 3-4 years of their career. That's the hope. If you're a Tsitsipas or a Zverev, it's not that you're suddenly or that they're suddenly going to get drastically better. It's that they are going to have these moments if they continue to put themselves in the mix of the best players in the world and they go deep in majors consistently. The hope is that it just breaks right for them at some point. Next one's from Ashley. Why do you think Alcaraz struggles on fast indoor hard courts? I kind of covered this in the last mailbag when the person asked me about Nadal and Alcaraz and if they're going to struggle similarly on indoor hard court. So I'm not going to take a long time with this. It has to do with the serve, not just the fact that the serve is a little bit weaker writ large, but also because the serve that he hits well is the kick serve. The serve that he relies on is the kick serve, and that is diminished as a weapon. I think in general, his forehand is just a better shot when he has more time. His drop shot is just a better weapon when he has more time. And schedule-wise, he's been beat up and worn down post-US Open. And correct me if I'm wrong, he's played clay in February, so we haven't seen him play indoor hard court in February. So not to mention the sample size, it's pretty small, right? It's two post-US Open hardcourt runs since Alcaraz has actually been Alcaraz, and that's really all we've gotten to see. So, yeah, that's my answer. It's all of those things combined. Let's see what happens as his career continues, because I'm not convinced that it's going to be I'm not convinced that it's going to be like Nadal, and, he's not going to win a year-end championship in his career. I'm not convinced of that. Next one's from Tim, Japan. Is Djokovic the clear favorite here? Here meaning Turin ATP Finals. I've heard the serve takes on a more important role in winning matches indoors. I wonder where you heard that. Which of the other 7 contenders would Nole be giving up any ground to on the serve? I think it is Medi. He seems to have the best serve in this field. Could you talk a little bit about Nole's serve, the serve index, and rank serves 1 through 8, giving reasons? I'd be very interested. Thank you. Well, sure. I think the serve levels in this top 8 are basically 3-tiered. There are some nuances within the tiers, but I think it goes like this. I think tier 1 would be Djokovic, Medvedev, Zverev, and Tsitsipas. Medvedev and Zverev have the big first serve weapons. They bring the pace. They're going to hit the most aces. They might get the most on returns just off the power of their serve alone. But their second serves do not compare to Djokovic's second serve or Tsitsipas' second serve. Tsitsipas and Djokovic are better spot servers, more about hitting their spots than the other two. So I think that those 4 are the tier 1 guys. Then I think there's a tier in the middle with Jannik Sinner and Oh, and Rublev. Yeah, Sinner and Rublev. Where if their first serves are on, they can have matches where they're getting a ton of purchase out of their first serve. It can be a real weapon for them. Sinner may be encroaching on tier one here, depending on, I don't know, we got to continue to see him develop. Red hot over the course of the Asian swing, the serve. I just got to see it for a little bit longer before I can vault him up to the tier one status. But also then there will be some matches where they're actually not getting as much help out of their serve as they want. I'd say that's the tier two. And then the tier three would be Ruud and Alcaraz, where they're not getting as much out of their serve on a regular basis as what they would like. So that's all. I think I answered that question. Next one is from member Tuck. Hi, Gil. Great work on calling T2 matches. Thank you for watching. Appreciate that. Do you think all the concern over Alcaraz's health in the long term is overblown? Similar things were said about Nadal, and he managed quite a long run. I assume Team Alcaraz has even more at their disposal than Nadal did 15 plus years ago. Also, any predictions on who... Okay, yeah, predictions will be tomorrow night, as I mentioned. Well, the hope for Alcaraz is that he will not have to do a Nadal. Because although Nadal had a long... is having a long career, which is still going, and has had success into his 30s, you don't aspire to do what Nadal has done, which is miss a lot of majors. What is it? Like about 3 years worth of majors that he's missed. 3 or 4, maybe even 4. Rehab a lot. Yeah, you don't want that. I mean, Alcaraz hopes that he has a healthier career than Nadal. That is the hope. And I still think that he probably will. The evidence, I mean, yeah, it hasn't been smooth sailing in the in the health department, I should say, for Alcaraz, and there have been some bumps in the road, but there hasn't been anything, for example, nearly as catastrophic as the foot stuff that Nadal was going through in 2004, and the knee stuff that Rafa was having, like the knee tendonitis stuff. That was another thing that was a constant in his career. I don't see anything for Alcaraz that's been kind of repetitive and lingering and pesky like Nadal's knees. So those things bode well. I still don't think Alcaraz has had, a single injury that's been super concerning in his career thus far. Next one is from Top Everything. Hey, Gil, really love your in-depth analysis. Best on YouTube. Thank you. I started playing tennis watching Djokovic, so I'm curious. Question: How did Djokovic seem more tired at the end of 21 at age 34 than in 2023, where he seems to have more energy left, yet he played more tournaments this year? Has his fitness gone up a level at 36? Well, first of all, just fact-checking you on the number of tournaments he's played. It's the same. So he's going to end 2023 having played 12 tournaments, and in 2021 it was the exact same number. So he's definitely hit a sweet spot, I think, when it comes to his scheduling. He knows exactly what he wants to do. Obviously, you throw in the Sunshine Double with this year's scheduling, and it would have him up at 13, and that would probably be the ideal for him. Has his fitness gone up? I mean, I don't know. We're nitpicking 2021 here. Remember, he was dominant in 2021. The circumstances that led to the depletion of energy in the Medvedev US Open final was really extenuating circumstances. You had an Olympic year. You had the fact that, he was tight in these matches, and therefore he wasn't finishing them clinically. So all throughout that US Open run, 4-setter, 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 5-setter in the semis, and then in the final, I just think if Novak was able to play better tennis, he wouldn't have been playing as much tennis en route to the final. And then there was the career Grand Slam pressure. So it wasn't just volume, not career, calendar Grand Slam pressure. So it wasn't just the volume of matches played. It was also the significance and the emotional strain that holding that weight of history kind of carries for Novak. Yeah, there were so many things. So I wouldn't use 2021 as an example. If you want to say that his fitness was worse than it is right now. But yeah, he's doing a lot of things to mitigate the decline of his fitness. First of all, there are things that we won't know that he's doing because he keeps these things close to the vest. He's very scientific about these things. He is constantly experimenting and tinkering and going the extra mile when it comes to diet and recovery and keeping himself healthy and keeping himself fit, right? We know that. And, he's not going to be open about his methods to the fullest extent. Although, I don't know. He said some stuff to Graham Bensinger in that interview, I remember. So yeah, it's hard to answer. It's hard to answer this question. Beyond that, we don't know some of the stuff that he does, but he does a lot of it, and he's passionate about it, and he's mindful of his rest, and he's mindful of his scheduling, and he's taken some point shortening adaptations as well. Serving bigger, coming forward more, a little bit more aggressive on the shot selection in the court positioning at times, choosing his spots to dig in and grind, and then also feeling certain parts of the match where, okay, I'm not going to do that. I am going to go big. I'm going to bail out of the rally because I know it's going to be better for me winning the match in the long run. Novak is making these decisions where nowadays, or not nowadays, back in his athletic prime, he just didn't need to make those decisions. He could just go all out every point. He doesn't do that anymore. Next one from Pasai. Hi, Gil. When coaching was approved by the ATP, there was a lot of speculation regarding how this may impact players' quality and fan engagement. However, it seems it has barely changed anything. When Djokovic's comments, or with Djokovic's comments, quote, "I'm happy we are able to freely communicate rather than hiding from a chair umpire like we did for years. Do you think this shows that on-court coaching was always happening to a significant degree but was just concealed better? Or do you think the lack of impact comes from on-court coaching being overrated, as less coachable aspects like focus, emotional control, and overall mentality are more important than technical/tactical aspects?" Okay, so the real question here in this comment is, why does it seem like coaching has barely changed anything? Which is a premise that I don't know, if I fully agree with it, right? I think there have been some tournaments where it's been a large topic of conversation, specifically the large Masters 1000s, where two things were true. One, the box was mic'd up and the director and the producer of the ATP broadcast were taking the audio often. And two, usually it was Alcaraz, Juan Carlos Ferrero situations. So you had a coach-player duo that was very active in taking advantage of the legalized coaching. Whereas sometimes it's happening, but it's going to seem like nothing's changed because the broadcast simply isn't taking the audio. Sometimes it can be happening, but we can't even engage with the subject matter because we don't speak the language that the coach is speaking to their player, which has happened, at least in my experience, as someone who embarrassingly only speaks English and can read Spanish, but usually when it's spoken, it's happening too fast for me to understand it. Yeah. That is why sometimes it feels like it hasn't changed anything. To the degree that it is overrated as a decider of wins and losses, yes, that is also part of it. Also part of it might be that usually the better tennis player wins the tennis match. That is to say that there is not a coach in the universe, the most brilliant, genius, unbelievably, fantastically mastermind, wonderkind, Ted Lasso. It doesn't matter what coach you have, in the match, you're never going to get Laszlo Djere to consistently beat Novak Djokovic. I don't know why I chose Laszlo Djere. I just had to pick a player, okay? Leave me alone. So yeah, I mean, that's part of it as well. Your other suggestion that, it's always been happening, therefore the legalization just doesn't feel like that big a change. I don't know. I just think it's happening more. I mean, I understand what Novak is basically saying. I'm glad we can just freely do it. I'm glad that the communication doesn't need to be like super subtle and maybe with some hand signs. And Novak's just saying, I'm glad that we can just be completely open about it. But I think if I followed up with Novak and I said, are you receiving more coaching than you used to? I do believe his answer would also be yes. Yes, the amount of coaching, because I don't need to hide from a chair umpire, has gone up. Does that make sense? Next one is from Hank Jesse. The Paris Masters is always cool to watch because I feel like they show court-level perspective more often. My roommates who aren't into tennis were watching some with me just because they thought the angle made it look cooler. I think that even something as simple as court-level shots would really help to make tennis more exciting to watch. Why does Paris seem to do it more, and why isn't it done more often? Why does Paris seem to do it more? I think the answer is because their high-up camera sucks. I think that's the answer. If you'll notice with Paris, the court is distorted on the high-up camera. I forget the physics of this, but the court in Paris, on the normal angle, it looks like a square, okay? And because it looks like a square and the court is distorted, the ball just doesn't look like it's traveling very fast, even though it is. So I appreciate that they don't, obviously they sometimes use the high up angle because it just gives you a better view of the player on the far side, a much better view at that. And you can kind of see the construction of the point better from up there. But I do appreciate that because their high angle isn't the best, they switch things up. They go to low angle where you can see the speed of the shots, the trajectory of the shots really well, the explosiveness and the speed of the play. But the real problem with that down low angle, and I know it's very popular in spurts and people really like it, including myself, I like it too, when they go to it on occasion. I'm telling you, for an entire match, and there should be studies on this, there should be focus groups done on this, but I don't think it's for the best, honestly. I think there's a sweet spot here. You have to find a middle, but on some of these low camera angles, you lose the player on the far side of the court. You're not really seeing, you don't have a good angle of where the ball is landing on the far side of the court, and you're just kind of losing the connection with that player. And it's all about the near side player. And that's the problem with that camera angle. But, it should be used a lot. And I love it on social media. Like, I think for social media clips, the low angle is great, especially when the player on the near side does something cool. Next one from Anonymous. Hey, Gill, is it a concern that Jannik Sinner has not been able to produce big results or make deep runs when playing back-to-back tournaments in best of three? An example of this can be seen after Beijing, where he won the title, and then shortly afterwards, he's unable to sustain tennis at a high level when he fell to Ben Shelton in Shanghai. I do think Shelton played amazing in that match, but okay. I get your point. Your point is correct. What is the cause of this, and do you think this is why he has underperformed in best of five? Yeah, I think you're directionally onto something here. I don't think Jannik Sinner is fully formed when it comes to his physical durability, his ability to bounce back after making deep tournament runs. Like, physically, he hasn't been there, and he's been getting there. He's been getting better and better. So when I'm answering this question, it's almost like, yes, I think there's a lot of validity to the observation, but the way you started is it a concern? To that, I would say, no, it's not a concern, because he's consistently shown to be on the path where next year this probably won't be an issue anymore. Remember, last year we were in a place where Jannik would be worn down by the quarters, by the semis. Like, he was playing great tennis in the first three or so matches, and then by the fourth and the fifth, he just wouldn't be the same player anymore. So we're continuing to progress. This year, that wasn't an issue for Sinner. That's why it's not a concern, because I think he's well on track. From anonymous tennis follower. Hi, Gill. I've seen many people say that Swiatek will never win a Wimbledon title because her game is just not suited to grass. Personally, I disagree. Her results on grass, while weaker in comparison to her results on other surfaces, have shown generally steady improvement over the years, with her making the Wimbledon quarterfinals this year after third round in 2022 and fourth round in 2021. She has also shown a strong desire to want to master the surface, saying she, quote, wants to become that kind of player who can play well on grass as well as feel comfortable there. And she seems to be a very fast learner. I could be biased because I'm her fan, but I think that her hunger and her ability to learn new things, plus the upward trajectory of her grass results, are much more relevant in evaluating her future prospects on grass than her grass game in its current form. If Nadal, with such a clay-oriented game, can win 2 Wimbledon titles, why can't Swiatek win 1? What are your thoughts? My thoughts are that I fully and wholeheartedly agree with you. I think this is a good comment. Attitude is really important when it comes to a surface that you're only going to be playing on 3 weeks out of the year, because we have seen it is possible to just be like, meh, not for me. And to just be like, yeah, no. We've seen this with a lot of players. I mean, maybe not a lot of top players, but I mean, Casper Ruud. And I've been critical of Casper Ruud. I've been critical that he's had this, I'm just not going to play well on grass attitude, because I strongly believe that in the current day, the modern grass at Wimbledon, there is no reason why you can't make it work if you are an elite baseliner. Doesn't really matter what your game is. You should be able to make it work. You should. I mean, Marketa Vondrousova won Wimbledon this year. Like, she doesn't serve big. She doesn't hit flat on her forehand. She defends a lot. Come on. The old days of grass tennis, they're over. Everybody, if they put their mind to it, they get comfortable moving on the surface. And that's an important key to it. If they get comfortable moving on the surface, which Iga, being the athlete she is, I don't think it'll take her that long. They can do it. They can do it. So Nadal's attitude, crucially, let me just put a bow on that point that you made. Rafa wanted Wimbledon, and he wanted it badly. He wanted it more than he wanted the Australian Open and the US Open. And that attitude that he brought to Wimbledon, even though he could have been like, look, clay's my surface, I'm winning French Opens, so it's really, it's not ideal. And remember that they were even closer together. Not ideal. 2 weeks later, I got to play Wimbledon. Forget it. No, that was not his attitude whatsoever. So I think Iga will probably win a Wimbledon title. Also, let's, I always like to do this with the Iga conversation. You just throw her age into the conversation as well. Her being 22 should also be factored in. All right, next one from David. Hi, Gil, love your videos. Was just wondering, what are your thoughts on Zverev's comeback from injury versus Thiem's comeback from injury? Zverev didn't play for the second half of last year, but he has done an amazing job this year with regaining his mojo and being one of the best players in the world, managing to qualify for the ATP Finals in Turin. Meanwhile, Thiem has struggled ever since his injury to get anywhere close to his form pre-injury, and in fact is barely in the top 100 this year, despite playing a full season. What do you think are the reasons for such a difference in the results of both Zverev and Thiem post-injury? Yeah, there are a lot of different directions I can go with this, and the coverage of Dominic Thiem, I'm sure, will continue. I don't want to get too in the weeds with him right now, but there's a major difference. There is a major difference between the two. Zverev was playing the best tennis of his life at the moment he got injured. Thiem was not. Thiem was having a very difficult 2021 season. He had just lost first round at Roland Garros to Pablo Andujar, and he was struggling. It seemed like he was struggling to put in the work off court. He was burnt out. But that's a theory, is that the same things we were seeing before he got injured, there's still problems for him. So Zverev didn't have that. And then when it comes to the injury in itself, the other theory for Thiem is that the reason his forehand just isn't the same, and believe me, it's not the same. And it's not even close. Go back and watch highlights. Remind yourself what the Thiem forehand was. It's not the same. And maybe, there is something about the strength and the flexibility of the right wrist that after the surgery, it was just never going to be as good, which is a little bit rare in modern medicine. Usually these surgeries are pretty good and you can get back to it. But think about Del Potro, man. Del Potro's two-handed backhand was never the same after his left wrist surgery. So I think the wrist surgery thing, all things considered, that's worse than rolling over an ankle and breaking your ankle when it comes to the ability to recover from that. That's worse. Let's end on this one from Dorioku. Is this the strongest ATP Finals field we've had in a while? Half the players are past champions: Djokovic, Medvedev, Zverev, Tsitsipas, and 3 of the other 4 have had great success indoors: Rublev, Sinner, Rune. And then there's Alcaraz, who can beat anyone, anywhere, if he's at 100%. Last year, I didn't have any hopes for half the players in the contest: Ruud, Fritz, Nadal, Rublev. And that seems to be my thought going back a few years, maybe because top players weren't as good indoors as everywhere else. This year feels different. I really think this year anyone can win. Djokovic is obviously the favorite, but he wasn't as razor sharp as I thought he'd be in Paris, but I expect him to make adjustments given his experience last week. Thoughts? I'll just speak to the first part of this comment. Is this the strongest ATP Finals field we've had in a while? Look, I hadn't thought about it until now, but yeah, it definitely is. And this is a byproduct of, what we've been saying the last 2 years, which is that these top players in the top 10 of the ATP, they're all really, really young and they're getting better quickly. And we looked at, a guy in Jannik Sinner who wasn't in the top 10. A guy in Rune who wasn't there yet, wasn't in the top 10 at the start of this year. Everybody's, kind of healthy also, right? Zverev was kind of an omission last year where you knew that he would have been in it if he had been healthy. Everybody's seemingly healthy. So, yeah, it is. It's a really, really deep field. And Alcaraz was injured last year, of course, as well, for the year-end championships. Rublev has had the best year of his career, arguably. So, even though he's made it 4 years in a row, it feels like he's maybe a more dangerous version of himself. He's got big title under his belt now. Yeah, I just all I can do is agree with you that this field is loaded, it's stacked, it's high-powered, and that is a great way to end it. I'll have some preview thoughts on the ATP Finals coming up in about 24 hours from the time this video gets posted. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.